So before starting today, I hope you all had a very nice Christmas, and I do wish you a good New Year. I need to right up front here remind you that we're going to be doing a live show. This is the last show of the year, and so our first activity of the next year is going to be our live show on Sunday at 7 o'clock. And I hope you can make it. It's the January 2nd. Okay. In the meantime, I have three donations. Thank you, Ola S., Leanne D., and Karen, with your recurring monthly donation. These are hugely appreciated. And I hope you're getting all you can out of what we're trying to do here. I'm going to talk today, as you can see, about drawing one more time. And it's going to feel like I'm repeating the same thing, but I'm trying to actually narrow down so we can I don't know if I want to say put it to rest, because there's so many ways to think about these things, and sometimes the phrasing matters, and sometimes the pictures you're looking at when you're saying them matters. So this is the question, and I apologize. I can't remember who did this, and I can't get back to my comments at this moment. I keep having these, what do you call them? Technology glitches if I'm left on my own. It's one of those things. So I apologize to you, whoever that was. And it's somebody, I think it's somebody that we regularly have, but I'm not sure about that. And if it wasn't, I am more sorry. But anyway, here's the question. Curious if there was anyone else, in your opinion, who excelled at drawing in that unifying method beyond Raphael and Degas. And by the way, that unifying thing, he's coming straight from that video of just a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was last week. What was it? Several. It was probably maybe 4 or 5 shows ago, where I'm talking about Degas, in particular on horses. So I was curious if anyone else, in your opinion, who excelled at drawing in that unifying method beyond Raphael and Degas. And what I was pointing out about when I was talking about the unifying, that unique look of unity, I think relates directly to memory training. And the first person I'm going to talk to you about is Alphonse Legros, who was part of the Lecoq de Boisbaudouin training that Degas either got directly or indirectly, and used all sorts of ways. I'm trying to find more examples in order to wrap my head around the idea of defying the construction of the figure. So there's 2 things in the word construction. I understand everybody who wants to do that and just draw fresh from life. I mean, and that's actually the history of painting. So you can just look at examples just everywhere, right? Except when you're talking about people doing imaginative pictures where they have to make up their own figure. And I am talking about a person like a Millet and or a as you all know, or I'm talking about figure construction drawing, today's construction drawing. And construction drawing today, I'll come back to the quotes in a second, but I'm going to, hope I don't forget they're there. But construction drawing today is probably largely coming from George Bridgman, and where you see all these angular things, very angular, pieced together in a very angular way, and made out of boxes and items like that, right? I think everything has a box. The head has a box and all that sort of stuff. But you can see all this interpretation, all this trying to comprehend the figure from, shall we say, from within, or from, what's the thorax, the pelvis, the knee. These are all sorts of things that are pretty cool in a sense to know, and maybe they would be ideal things in a CAD program for doing the figure or something. Not sure, but nevertheless, this is the construction. I believe what happened at the Art Students League, where I was trained, the construction method, I think, comes out of this. And if not that, it might very well come from the Barg, and Barg plates are right here and here. And but you can see this angle thing that Barg is doing, and you can see it in Jérôme's drawings as well. And as we know, the Barg and Jérôme sort of got together, we think, on creation of this, whatever you want to call it. It looks like almost like a training course, a visual training course of some sort. I've never seen words to describe what they were doing, but nevertheless, you see these breakdowns, purely angular breakdowns. You see this angular breakdown of a figure drawing, and you go from here to having more something, and then to having shadow line, having masses and modeling take place. This, not necessarily in this precise look, this is what we did with Gamel, but I'm just talking now about the idea of the constructed, the angular construction, So I use the word hack, hack, hack. We used to do that at the Art Students League. I'll show you some of my stuff later on so you can see it and compare a little bit. So, but that's the other kind. That's construction drawing, but it's not figure construction necessarily. It can be done in many different ways when you're making a figure up out of your head. And you certainly can do it from anatomy per se. He calls this anatomy construction, constructive anatomy. So I don't know, it's a funny thing for him to say it that way. I don't see much anatomy in one sense here at all. But I do see the underlying, what would you call it? The underlying boxes and balls and stuff. I tend to call it, box construction or something, three-dimensional box construction drawing or something. Nevertheless, and that's not to pick on it, I'm just simply pointing out, and keep remembering this, that I'm talking about a way of working that if you have a model standing in front of you, my question would be, why would you do that? Why would you put all sorts of boxes and stuff in place on here? I can understand when you're drawing, actually noting the points that relate to each other and noticing their, like the hip bones when they show, and getting that angle, noting the angle in relation to vertical. That's hugely important stuff. When you see some aspects that are like each other, say, even the two knees, just noticing the angle in relation to each other, or the whatever. Anything else like that, of course, you should do that, and those angles matter hugely. But to draw from life, to draw a shape, just to draw the shape the way it as it appears, is something closer to the historical way. When you see David and Ang, you can see them making toes and things like that out of a book. So that part is, another form of constructing a figure when you don't draw what you see. But there's this whole range of mixes that have some more underlying construction and less, and more looking, and or more literal borrowing from the figure, and others with much less, just using the figure as a takeoff point. And there's a reason to do those things, especially when you're doing imaginative work. But I should say only when you're doing imaginative work. But let me just give you the examples. You're asking me for examples. Here's Alphonse Legros. And Alphonse Legros was a fellow student, as I said, with Degas. I don't know if I said that to you today. Lecoq, de Boisbaudouin, the Training of the Memory in Art. That's a book that can be had. I have copies of it here, but I don't have an online copy. I think it's available online now, so you might want to look that one up. But one of the things that's necessary, and I'll go back to the quotes now for a second. These are the recommendations of Ang and Sargent. Ang says to Degas, "Draw lines, my son, lots of lines from memory and from nature." And Sargent says, "Draw the longest line you can remember." So that doesn't imply a hack thing, does it? In either case, you're memorizing lines and you're drawing lines that you see, lines in nature. And that's what you're trying to memorize, okay? So understanding that, and that's the difference between construction drawing, understanding that, you begin to understand what these guys were doing. They're drawing lines like the length of that, shall we say, or articulating line out here and wherever it shows up. But this is where Degas might be saying it's all about the silhouettes, or drawing is what happens between the contours. But the contour implies a contour line, right? It implies that you're drawing from that line. And so you can see, I wish these were stronger, but drawings are like that, especially these things are silver points. And silver point really does rather not want you to chunk up the paper. In fact, all drawing is rather like this. You can make a kind of an angular or junked up mess underneath and then draw your line darker over it. But you don't see much evidence. I don't know if you see any evidence of that in most 19th century drawing. What you do see, though, is a lot of thrown lines. You might memorize this entire line and throw it once. figure out where the top's going to be and the bottom, throw that line, and then correct it. Correct the angle from here to here, and correct the distance out from and the location of this, say, this key point right here, without drawing hack lines on it. Right? You don't have to draw hack lines like that. But I would suggest to you, by the way, if you're going to work this way, that you are never unaware of this angle and their relation to each other and their relation to vertical, and this angle right here and this relation to vertical. So if you ever forget those things, you'll be struggling with that shape being at the wrong angle. So every shape has that. There's a lot of little angles in here, a lot of little angles, but the primary one that you're after is, so you memorize this line, the primary one you're after is this one and this one, right, shall we say? And that's the way the bigger thinking is. Now, people can put those lines down at the beginning if they want to, but I found that when I put a top here and a bottom here, and I put a tip of a nose, I have those angles, and if I draw this with enough articulation, it actually is fully implied on the page that it's the same gesture or proportion as that human. So that's the part of this conversation here. So here's Ang, and I'm really doing this just to give you examples. So here's Ang, and you'll find that he always is drawing from outlines. He's not ever doing construction drawing. And these things are all done from life. I don't know if anybody in history has ever drawn more from life than Ang. Maybe Degas himself. I probably could have brought you images of Munkachi. Is that who I'm thinking of? Menzel, not Munkachi. And many other people. But you just look around, they're all out there. Virtually everybody does it at a certain point in history. But at least when they're drawing from life. And significantly, guys will do it when they're drawing from imagination as well. So there's Ang being an example of that. And you can see that whenever he's doing these lighter studies, he's planning to build on them, but he's making them as like as he can, the Bonnat law, and then making them more like in the next iteration. This one here might give you a little better read on some of the very preliminary lines, but you don't see angle stuff trying to construct this once. He floats lines out there and then refloats them. Sometimes you'll see, I don't know if it's in any of these, you'll see him put a leg out here, and then he'll draw the same leg exactly at a different angle, going to a different location out here, the entire leg. And so you can see two legs under there. I don't have an example of that. But that's drawing from the actual line. Now, here's Augustus John, who has these moments of brilliance, and then a whole lot of other stuff between. But again, you can see here's a line guy, right? So he's memorizing the line. He's not doing construction. That's all I'm telling you here. That's all I'm showing you this for. I'm showing you this guy drawing lines. So here he's got this foot. It went off the page, interestingly. And so he put the foot back in the page over here, it looks like. I don't know if somebody else may have cropped this. I don't know if that's true, but it looks like he may have drawn it for some reason, started here where it's going to run off the page. But you can follow what's happening there. It's a contour. It's the whole thing is based on contour. This is the outline model. It's not based on construction. It's based on shapes, and shape play. This shape playing to this shape, and this long shape here, or this shape here picking up the reverse this shape. And this whole thing, these shapes have to be there for you to have this study, don't you think? So you hack your way through this, and then finally get some realism on here. You're going to be so exhausted that you'll never really have the energy to go back and see this, now that you've finally made it rather look like that. So one of the arguments for doing the line approach is so that when you're drawing this line, the only way you can tell if that's right is to have this line or some other answering line, have this line speaking to it. That's the actual shape, the actual look of this shape and size of the shape, feeding off of each other and forming the look of nature. And by the way, that's where the music lies in these things. It's in the interrelations, as Michelangelo says, of such things as this, forming what he calls a counterpoint, a reversal, an S-curve, whatever you want to call that. But anyway, you can always see these guys throwing lines. Ang's same Disgustus John. Gemma used to call him Disgustus, by the way, probably because he went so sideways so frequently. But this stuff is beautiful stuff. I mean, this guy has actually developed touch in a way that's really special. So let's have a look here at Sargent doing the same thing. Now, if anybody you think in the modern era might do it, it might be Sargent. He did work with Jerome, but as much as he's aware of the importance of angles, he's still telling you to draw as long a line as you can. So he might have memorized a line that maybe went from here to there, like that, and then had this here, and then memorized this one from here to here. But I mean, whatever he could hold in his brain. By the way, he's that guy that talked about lying there in the dark at night, about to go to sleep, and trying to remember the lines of the day, things he had seen, and trying to hold them and trace them in his on his mind. Reminded me a little bit of the Queen's Gambit, the movie, which I did get a kick out of. I always like movies where somebody becomes an expert in their field. It's usually interesting. So, and by the way, I think in that movie you get a sense that there's a point at which, if you really want to be the best of what you can be, you have to get past this thing that you might call talent or innate something or other that you don't even know how to control, to something where you actually, mastery implies something you actually have authority over from knowledge. You actually know what every single part of the game is. And you see her breaking that out, the start, the end game, the middle game. You see her breaking that out in the course of this discussion of her chess activity. A very interesting thing. I'd never heard of the woman before. And it's very impressive. So everything you look at here, you'll see Sargent drawing. You'll see him using sometimes more angle. He doesn't do that sweet curly thing that you see so often and that's discussed as John has, but he's still he's still interested in the shape as you see it, right? So you're piecing it together. The part we're talking about is how you get the unity. And so significantly, this is the unity is, you're seeing stuff, you're piecing it together. You must piece everything together, but your grasp of it as a whole is a memory thing. So you have to look at the thing as a whole, get some idea of it in your mind, and then no matter what you draw, be aiming at unity. The only way to get unity is to aim at unity, but the unity of what? So it's the unity of the visual impression. And the unity of the visual impression, it's not a question of niceness or something like that, or evenness. That's not unity. Unity is having the thing hang together in the way that it hangs together in nature to produce the same impression. And so when you're drawing a picture like this, having this line here and having it speaking to this line, all of which are talking to these guys incorporatively, right, requires you to have an idea of that in your mind and then go for it and then improve on it as you get further along and have arms and legs sticking out. You keep referring back to that thing about and adjust to the unity of the whole, to the general impression of the whole. But if you're not using real lines, it's way more difficult to do it. You only get one shot at it. Just keep cranking at it and chunking at it and that sort of thing. That's my feeling about what happened to me. I felt that, and I'll show it in the last drawings on this page. Oh, they're here already. Okay. So here where you can see, some very, very difficult ones to see, you can see some of my digging around on construction drawing. This one here probably is the most painful example. Who knows what phase I was in, but I don't think I was at the very beginning. I think I'd already filled up a notebook by the time I'm doing this. But you can see that everything here is, you might say, a search for some angular connection. It's trying to draw the figure through the search. So some version of the bar, some mild version. Remember when we did these things, and I apologize, this is so weak, but when we did these things, remember that we had no, what was I going to say? Sorry about that. I lost the point. Let me see if I can look at these and come back with it. Yeah. No, there was no drawing instruction down there at the art students. Like, you just had guys, doing it. You just saw, like in the Brackman classroom, you'd see a certain amount of angles and junk and throw a few things out there, sort of creating a little envelope, and then you start working from that envelope you'd set up. We see people working a very long time on this angular thing here, but we had, that's what I was going to say. We had usually about 10 minutes for most of these poses, or 5, and we'd be so happy to get 25, and every once in a long while you get a whole hour. I used to say the difference between Boston and New York was about 3 hours per session on one pose. So this is me a little more evolved, and you can see I'm going, there's a lot of this angular chunking and sort of X's at different places, and I'm getting to the point, though, where I'm starting to draw longer lines earlier without doing all that kind of stuff. But you can see that there's no neglect of angles. I'm laying angles on here to look at them. Like, these are underlying angles. but I'm not constructing the figure. I'm just using those. So I've thought about it. So I've made sure that I've thought about it, but I still didn't know that the angles here, the only way these angles can be right is to be right to vertical. I still hadn't met plumb yet after whatever number of years at the Art Students League. I was probably in the second year. And so, but plumb, so what's plumb? You know what I mean? So if these figures stand upright, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why, because I never run into plumb. But plumb, this line over here, the vertical line on your paper, of your paper, shall we say, all angles in it have to be right to that, can be righted to that. Like this is what I call the God of all angles. Anyway, now I'm just talking a lot about drawing. So, but this is the evolution of that way of working. So eventually, I'm doing figures where I'm not using much of that at all. It's mostly drawn longer lines. You can see I have no control of values like I need to have. But that's a figure where you can see it. This is not a very big figure, by the way. It's probably about a 5-inch figure, maybe 5 inches high. And but then here, I'm going to just point at this line right here. This shows you the underlying line here that I eventually moved over to here. But you can see I'm drawing with lines, just lines, just shapes, no angular buildups. So this is an example of that kind of drawing where then, and again, I'd run you back to Disgustus John and suggest to you that I already run into John's at this point. Had been with Gamel for a while at this point. And finally was a student of all of the painters and significant painters in history and their drawings. So then this one here is a figure constructed out of my head. And so you can probably find problems with it, but I'm trying to create a flying figure, an angel like he's supposed to be reading the book of life or something or other. So it's Judgment Day kind of thing. But you can see that I'm creating a figure, and I'm not doing any of this in a construction way, and I'm not doing it from anatomy. I'm just drawing it from memory, and I'm trying to put in stuff that I know about. So, but I know about visually, like the way the thigh does that and arcs up this way and has, these various breaks that then lead into the knee and so on. That's stuff that's in my memory now. But so I throw lines out there. I have a concept, I throw a line, and then I look at it, it doesn't feel right, and I try another line. And one of the things I suggest you need to do is you need to be a little bit bold. Throw a line, make it light, throw it and have a look at it, let it lead a little bit, and then adjust based on that. So if your line's a little bit in the wrong place, move it down a little bit and draw it just a little bit darker with the new angle or the new shape, the improved information. But I don't think of this as drawing from anatomy or drawing anatomy. It's drawing the look of nature as I know it. So I happen to be on the leg there, and so I'm drawing it. I'm trying to draw something that my sense of what a leg ought to look like. But it's contour based, right? So it's not, I didn't draw underlying anatomy, didn't draw bones and things like that. But this is, of course, you've got to look at this just like what it is. It's just an idea for a gesture of a figure. Okay. And I think that is all I have for you today. I'm going to go back to your question, as I often do, guys. See if I can get back there in a hurry. And I'm hoping my Mr. Producer will not jump you through all this stuff. Curious if there's anyone else in your opinion who excelled at drawing in that unifying method beyond Raphael and Degas. So I'm saying virtually everybody did, whether they got it as unified as Degas. I think that's one of those things that makes Degas so special. It's this incredible sense of unity and flow. The thing hangs together in truth, but also with an elegance of unity in treatment, unity of, the look of nature, shape. When I say treatment, I mean like when you saw my drawings a little bit, my last drawings in there, I didn't have any control of values. That's what I mean. That's uncontrolled values. Degas got crazy unity. And he's doing it from life. So that my point of view for you is if you're doing it from life, that's what we're doing. Whatever else works. I hope this is worthwhile to you. Just look at everybody. Look at everybody. And what I'm going to suggest you do is look for underlying marks on their work that suggest a construction that way, or underlying marks, as you see in Michelangelo, that suggest bones and muscles that are known, where the guy is actually marking them out. You can see any number of people. You can see even in Degas where he'll find a salient point that really reads, and it happens to also correspond with the knee. That doesn't mean he was drawing from knee anatomy knowledge. And I wouldn't tell you it was a horrible thing to do that, to know anatomy, but I'm going to tell you that to have the skill to draw a shape the way you see it, at the right gesture, at the right proportions, at the right size to the whole of all the other parts, that's of greater value to you, because even to draw anatomy, you have to be able to do that. So, yeah, so I'm just going to say that there's a few examples. There's tons more out there. Just look a lot. And I'm going to get out of this video, and I apologize for not remembering who you were. Maybe I'll bring your name up next week. In the meantime, thank you all for donating, sharing, hitting all the appropriate buttons, liking. And then, again, reminding you, and again, yeah, also thanking Ola, Leanne, and Karen one more time for your donations. Thank you so much. And then reminding you again that on Sunday next week, is it Sunday next week? January the 2nd, we are live. And I really would love to see your comments and your conversations. Numbers of you have actually been working on the way of thinking that I have, where you're taking parts of it and building, trying to use it incorporatively in one way or another to see if you can improve your skills. I'm hoping that to hear from you in terms of things you're dealing with. So seeing a lot of new names out there now, and I look forward to all sorts of new people online, and all you guys whose names I love to see again and again. Who you know who you are, and I consider you my friends, my atelier, atelier of the air. All right, so I'll leave it at that. 7 o'clock, January 2nd, and thank you, Mr. Producer, for putting all that information down here. And we'll see you in the next video. We'll see you live. All right.